This is Fam Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air with Miguel Landestoy, musician, podcaster, and lover of all things nerdy. So, how you doing tonight?
Oh, we're doing pretty good. Thanks for having me on, man.
And we love to talk to people from around the world. We've been doing it since 2016. This is actually episode 1105 of our podcast, and we've been out here for a while. And let everybody know they can listen to us on Newsly later tonight. And if they use the coupon code of GHOST, they can check that out for 30 days for free. We are a featured podcast on that platform. And we have your link tree, which is /playback. And that will be fully clickable to anybody who wants to click through that when we're fully published. Right now we're on Facebook, Twitch, and YouTube Live. So maybe I'd like to start. Usually I ask people a couple questions is at the beginning is like, what motivates you and why do you do what you do?
Yeah, I mean, music has been a part of my life since I can remember, honestly. I am currently in a bit of a, I don't want to say funk, but I'm in a kind of reimagination period because I have a hand injury that kind of
stops you.
Yeah, kind of stopped me in my tracks for a second. Maybe had to reflect for a little bit, but I do what I do because music is one of those things that can push boundaries, make connections. It allows me to really delve into the love I have for others, and maybe give folks an inkling as to who I am. So I really think it's like it's so cheesy to say, but it is a universal language.
Yeah, it's like I'm big time into frequency, in the sound waves. I'm a synthesis, but at the core, I'm a songwriter, right? And I've been writing songs. I'm 56-year-old. I've been writing songs since I was 17. I actually, was kind of this kid child of the 70s, listened to like everything. My father was into Nat King Cole, Motown, James Brown. My older brother was into Zeppelin. My younger brother was into Miles Davis. So I heard like everything. And my mom was into from West Virginia. She was into Johnny Cash, right? So I was hearing like everything, all the different types of genres, and like from Brubeck to Sun Ra. So so many different influences. I just like everything, and I would kind of like, how come you can't like merge things?
Right.
And so I've always been into musicians that try to cross things, like Davis getting into fusion from bebop, and Coltrane getting really crazy with his expression, and guys like Sun Ra and Prince, and Lou Reed and the Velvets. I would go everywhere, from like early hip hop to like punk. And so I was like all over the map. But what the main driver was, are you creative? Are you trying to do something new? And I feel like music is this universal language, right? And I think you can express yourself, and it's very cathartic for the songwriters and the musicians who do it. It's kind of like they have to do it because they love it so much, but it's a part of their process. Is that, do you find anything that kind of resonates there?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of started off classical growing up, and I was playing a lot of your Mozarts, your Beethovens, your Bach, your Chopins, all that kind of stuff. And I liked it, but it wasn't really something that I loved, or it didn't really click with me. And then when I was studying music in college, I started to improvise, and I was in like kind of a alternative rock band, and when I was in high school, and instead of everything kind of being written out and just like plastered onto my face, play this. My bandmates were like, "Hey, can you just try to figure something out over this riff?" And I was like, "Oh, okay. So we're having like a communicative moment right now. This is so much more than just
flow state.
Exactly. And through that and playing shows and doing all these different types of things, music has given me so many things, friendships, relationships, mentorship, et cetera, et cetera. So I think I lost track of your question, but it definitely the creativity piece is
Or
huge, and it's I think it's what keeps me coming back. I'm not one of those people that practices for 12 hours a day. I can't. I don't really have the attention span to do that. But what keeps me coming back rather is like that constant. Okay, well, what is this? What would this sound like? Or how would this work? Or how would I, do hip hop with Sun Ra influences? That would be a crazy thing to do, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
it's really interesting because I was listening. I always like watch like clips from big artists. Like so, Frank Zappa was
Mm,
asked like, "Do you think you're a good guitarist?" And was going like, he said a lot of lead guitarists spend all the time trying to make sure they know that solo, and they do so much repetitive practicing so they got it down exactly. He
right.
said, "I'm not about that. It's like I'm gonna interpret that solo however I feel that night, and that's what
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna do. Not that I couldn't do it, but I don't.
Right.
I choose not. It's not fun for him. That he's like, I choose not to do it that way because why am I gonna go be so into the perfect notes? He's more into like the happy accident, you know. And I was always like, wow, that's cool to have that kind of to have the capability that you could, but
Mm-hmm.
choose not to because it's a different direction.
Yeah, I mean, I'm mainly a jazz musician, so like the idea of wrong notes, it's like there's context, right? So like if you're playing some cocktail gig at someone's wedding, yeah, maybe you don't want to
Hit a bad note.
lay out and play free. You don't want to do that, right? But um if it's what comes to you in the moment and it's the right setting, then go for it. Or don't put yourself in a situation in the first place, right? Don't put yourself in
Yeah.
a situation where the bride's going to be pretty pissed off. Uh,
Yeah, it's kind of like Coltrane and Hancock talking about
mm,
not Coltrane but John, but I think Herbie Hancock talked about there's a famous line where he was talking about playing with Miles Davis and he hit the wrong chord and Davis
mm,
didn't respond like it was the wrong note, right? He
right,
actually took it and took the song and evolved it. And
right,
then Herbie
exactly.
said, "Wow, I don't have to be so hyped about hitting the perfect note. You can
Hmm.
look at it as an opportunity to evolve. At least if you're doing fusion or bebop, you can evolve it. You can don't have to say, oh, we got to start from the beginning again. That you can actually take it and kind of live in the moment.
100%. I think it's Victor Wooten, the bass player.
Yeah, he said that too.
Yeah, he always talks about how many mistakes he made. I think I forget who the pianist was, but he was like, I haven't met someone who plays so many wrong notes so well, and they were talking about Victor Wooten.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. He's always
because
he has a big thing talking about there are no bad notes because I
right,
can actually make it work in any key. I can make it work from any key with like the intention of the
mhm.
rhythm. I can still make it work as long as I believe in
Exactly.
it.
What you said there was the key, right? It's the rhythm. Like when it comes to any groove based music, and even when you're talking about like kind of more freely improvised music, like there is a certain rhythm that you got to latch onto, or else it's not going to work. It doesn't matter how many of the right notes you're playing. If you're playing them
Yeah,
not in
yeah.
time, then it's
Yeah,
just not going to sit down.
timing. It's the whole
Right.
thing. It's like James Brown. Yeah, like I was
Mhm.
watching James Brown, and he's not like a technical musician, but he's a field musician.
Oh my
So
God,
he's
yeah.
with his band. And he had a new drummer, and
Hmm.
he's looking at the guy, and he just starts shaking his head. The guy don't got it. Like he doesn't have my beat. And he's like, hold it, stop. And he's like, you need like he's like, you need to get. And he did, he would just kind of scat it out. So he scattered it out to the drummer, and the drummer finally got it. But what he was getting at, but he
Hmm.
couldn't technically tell him, oh, you're in 3/4, you're you're doing. He just
Yeah.
had to show him, kind of like Michael Jackson used to do. There's like a lot of guys from that
Hmm.
era. They could actually just tell you, this is what I want, and they kind of vocally scattered out.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the first person to tell anybody, and I went to music school and I work at a music school, all that stuff. You don't need to go to music school to be a great musician. Like, it, it's if you want to be like an educated musician, someone who understands theory and all that kind of stuff,
Theory,
music
yeah,
school is great. But like, I mean, history shows it, right? But like,
shows
you do
it like
not need to
Hendrix. He didn't know how to sight read, but look what he
anything.
did.
Exactly, exactly
Like
right.
if you think a guy like Hendrix is like sight reading, probably would have wrecked what he was trying to do. because he was so kind of cosmic in his
Mm-hmm.
interpretation. And the fact he was left-handed and restrung the guitar and then
Right.
taught himself and then had a different point of view. And that's one of the things I always got into is if you take a guy that's not an expert at their instrument and you put them on a different instrument, sometimes that can lead to results that are like totally unexpected. And it's like, wow. Like you get
Right.
like a guy like Eddie Van Halen is a guitar player, but when he gets on the synth, he does something that's like, wow, I wouldn't have thought of that. Or like Pete Townsend, his interpretation of like how he used synthesizers is
Mm-hmm.
not like, the guys from Yes or the guys from Emerson, Lake and Palmer. He
Right.
came up with a different strategy for using sequencers and envelope followers and come up with these sounds that nobody even to this day does. Like the way on some of those
Yeah.
Who songs have this like synthesis that was like, wow, because the keyboardist thought of it in a different way. As a guitar player,
Yeah.
he's like, well, I don't want to use it that way. I'm going to use it like this.
Right. Right. That's why it's so important to like not, kind of box yourself in. There are people that are like, no, I'm only gonna learn, like a piano player, like I'm only gonna learn Bill Evans
Type of
transcriptions
style.
because that's he's
That's
a
what they
pianist.
think
That's
is
what
is like bebop. Bebop is jazz, right? You got guys
exactly.
that said that, and then when fusion came along, it's like, oh, I can't get it to
Yeah, I
that.
mean, in a lot of ways, we're still kind of stuck in that place. Like uh, jazz has become so like academicized, right? What they teach in
Oh
like
yeah,
the music schools and conservatories
Berkeley,
is
yeah.
yeah. They're teaching bebop. I mean, I will say Berkeley is a little. Um, they there are the
More
one place
inventive.
where they're teaching like popular music
Hmm.
in a different kind of way. I mean, full disclosure, I actually work there, but it's like
Hmm.
a I also grew up in the Boston area, and I've kind of always
Hmm.
been around Berkeley people. So
Hmm.
it's kind of like working for the empire, but
Like the canon. Well, like if you're in the canon, then they got the canon, like holy grails, right? So you can't touch it, And
yeah.
then you get people like, well, why not? Like you get like a guy like Sun Ra.
Hmm.
I got totally into Sun Ra, and
Hmm.
I like the fact that he was so imaginative. And so, like,
Hmm.
why can't I do that? Like, so he's one of the first jazz guys to actually get a synth. He's one of the first guys Bob Moog ever gave a synth. If you check the history, and then what he did with it, a lot of the traditional musicians at the time were like, you can't use those because that's not a pure instrument, right?
What does
It's
that
like you
what does that
can't
even
use a
mean?
synthesizer
Yeah.
because it's not acoustic, so you can't use it. It's not valid. And then he incorporated it into his orchestra, and it's like now everybody now goes back and says, wow, look at what he was doing.
No, those Sun Ra records go deep, 100%. And it's really interesting to see how you know that kind of more free improvisation kind of movement in the mid '60s, mid '60s, late '70s, like
70s, yeah.
um, uh, kind of took on its own thing because it was so like there was so much backlash because it was almost like they were the
What are you
musicians
doing?
were antagonizing the audience in a way, right? They're
Oh
kind of
yeah,
like yeah,
kind of
like
Like Dylan going electric at the jazz festival, and people saying, "Oh, you're a Judas. Like, what are you
yeah.
doing? You're supposed to sound like Arlo Guthrie and Woody Guthrie, and now you're
Mhm.
doing this nasal thing, and you're doing this stuff with heavy guitars." And they're like, "No." And then the coolest thing I ever heard of was like Dylan in London when he did it.
Mhm.
People said he was a Judas and said, "I don't believe you," and he kept on playing. And he
Right.
did his set, and then like 5 years later, that type of music done with the band live was like the in thing. But in
Mhm.
'66,
That's
it
right.
was blast. But it was like '74,
There it
no
is.
problem.
Yeah, people don't like change. They can't handle it. Especially when it's their favorite. Their favorite thing is changing.
Yeah,
People put so much stock um into that thing, whatever it is, music, art, whatever, as part of their personality. So when that thing changes, they're like, I can't even
can't dig
like
it.
sit with that.
It's hard to handle. Like they get a guy like Bowie, right?
Yeah.
And Bowie goes and he comes out as himself, David Jones, doesn't hit. Nothing works. Then he does Ziggy, that really works. And then the record label, everybody's like, stay as Ziggy. I'm like, nope. I'm switching to Thin White Duke. I'm switching to Aladdin Sane. He would change it, and it was like against his economic interest to change it. But he's like, and the fans wouldn't like it. It's like, what are you doing? And so he could have stayed as Ziggy and bid millions and millions upon dollars as Ziggy and keep it going. But he chose to reinvent himself all the time. And he had the statement where he said, I like to tread water musically because I don't feel I'm going anywhere unless I do.
Ooh, I like that. I like that. Are you listening to any Janelle Monáe by any chance?
Yeah, I like Janelle. I think she kind of channels the purple one. I love.
Yep.
I'm a Prince head. I'm a purple head.
Yeah.
And I like the way she interprets that funk. I mean, she has her own. She's not just biting off of Prince, but she has that aesthetic as a female, as a woman coming at it, and better than any of his proteges. Maybe Sheila E. was cool, but she actually gets it. She has it. And I really dig when somebody has that.
Yeah, definitely. What brought her to mind was that just like completely different, like
personas,
depending on the record.
Change it every time.
Yeah, and I think that's a really smart way to do it because then you're not like you are personally vested, right? But like there is a separation between you and the art, so you can kind of function. Because sometimes like the art can just like take it away, man. They can really like not.
You get guys that get stuck in the one period,
exactly,
because that's their biggest hit, and then they have to do like Hotel California or like every night. You got to do it every night. Can't do anything else. But it's like, but if you a guy like Prince, it's like he has so many periods. Like he came out there at the beginning, and then people say, well, the Dirty Mind period is like that's key. But then there's 1999. How many bands cloned 1999? Man, 1999 itself with the Minneapolis sound, people could just live their whole career on that. And then he goes from that to Purple Rain, and he doesn't even repeat Purple Rain. He's like, I'm tired of that. The thing that made him the most money. And he's like, oh, I'm done with that. I'm going to go do Around the World in a Day. It had nothing to do with it. It's like totally different directions. And he would change his personas. And then he'd get people where there are periods where he would not play Purple Rain. And people get ticked off. And you go and do a whole and never touch any 1999 Purple Rain, just do Emancipation stuff all night. That's it. Because that's where he was.
Yeah, I mean, for me, that's why it was such a big deal when he actually did the Super Bowl halftime show, maybe now like 15, 20 years ago. Because like it was such like a moment, like because I feel like a lot of folks who aren't as familiar with Prince don't put like the respect on his name that there should be. Maybe one of the best guitarists of his era. No one really talks about that. They talk about all the other stuff, the symbol, all that kind of stuff.
The hyperbole, they're going all that into that instead of like he is actually, Hendrix is great, but as a musician, Prince is more polished in terms of like all the instruments and the production and the creating styles. He could do things Prince couldn't do. I mean, Hendrix couldn't do. I mean, Hendrix was an amazing guitar player, reinvented it. Created like progressive rock. Created like the acid rock, psychedelic rock. But Prince, he created funk. He could do jazz. He can do pop on demand. The quality of his songs is like unbelievable. And the level of musicianship with one guy doing like everything, it sounds like a band. Most of the time, his records, you think that's a band. It's all him. Like, who can do that?
No, he's a freaking, he was a freaking genius. R.I.P. I think about Prince a lot because he was a Jehovah's Witness towards the end of his life. I grew up Jehovah's Witness, and I'm always fascinated with
how his direction he went that way.
Yeah, it's super fascinating to me because like I'm not currently a Jehovah's Witness, and I always like it's fascinating to me to see these people who are like stars or are have these like alter egos. I mean, Prince was like a sex icon, And
Yeah, total sex
but he's like passing out watchtowers on Saturday. I'm like,
yeah,
what?
like,
What's
well,
going
he
on?
kind of had this revelation. It's kind of like a lot of artists. There was a period where Bob Dylan got born again, and I think
Right.
what happens is these people to get into such, the fame can kind of corrupt them, and then they're looking for some way to kind of level out because they think they went too far. And I think that a lot of times it's like that success becomes such a double-edged sword that they feel the negative energy so much that they feel they need to redeem themselves in some way. A lot of times it's in a religious conversion or something like that, or spiritual conversion, and they just feel like they have to cleanse themselves or get back to something that's more real than the money and fame. That's what I think happens. But
no, yeah, I don't disagree. Yeah.
that's interesting because music to me has been like a savior. It's like as a creative process, and I've talked to a lot of authors, actors, painters, and a lot of times people are like, "Well, you're doing it just for money," or a lot of times when you talk to a pure artist, a creator, they kind of do it because it is part of their life to actually music. Is that how you kind of look at music?
Yeah, yeah. It's why there's been such a shift for me over the last year because of this injury, because it was like a constant, like regardless of whatever else I was doing, because I was always like, doing like arts administration stuff for like music nonprofits. I was always teaching like piano lessons, group lessons, and classes, and gigging pretty consistently. And I was doing all those things at once because that's the only way I knew how to function. Which led to a lot of burnout and a lot of other things. But it's been like a compulsive thing. Like if there was a piano in the room, I just wanted to sit down at it. Yeah. This last year, I've kind of had to like figure out
what
that looks like when I'm not just able to sit down and play. I've been reading a lot of books. I've been taking in the creative processes of a lot of other types of artists, authors. Been reading, just reading a lot. It's unheard of for like an adult with like a full-time job to read like 30 40 books a year, but that's what this last year has been for me. Just to kind of like
didn't take a break. I had as a keyboardist I had carpal tunnel at one period back in 2017, and I had to like back off. And then kind of what I did is I got into modular synthesis. And I had been using Rolands and Junos and the traditional 61 key, 88 key synths. But then I said, well, you know what? If I experiment with these like things that don't have keyboards, and then connect them to things like an Akai Force or an MPC, and learn how to sequence and use the CV and get into the sound design. And in sound design, you just get into like, what can I do with this square wave? What can I do with this triangle wave? What can I do running it through a filter bank? And it's kind of like, because I bought the stuff. I mean, I looked at the theories and I read about what they should do, right? But a lot of it was like, if I actually do this, what happens? If I do this and I put this wire in here, I change the filter here, and I do. So by having it and just experimenting, and then seeing, this is how you get bells, this is how you get basses, this is how you get wood blocks, this is how you get these. Then you start to actually understand what you're actually doing. And it became like this whole thing, just trying to get the tone. You can spend 3 hours trying to get the tone without even playing anything at all.
No, it gets heavy in there. Like I had a buddy who he was doing some like hip hop production stuff, and he had gotten like an old school like 1983 like MPC, and floppy disk, the whole thing.
Old school, that's a cool one.
And he was sitting with it, and he was like sampling me playing the piano live, and he's like, "Watch me turn this into drums. Watch me turn you playing this into a beat." And it like blew my mind. It like, it made me think about non-traditional musicians, people that only make music electronically, don't like. Didn't learn any
have the theory. It's a lot of experimentation.
And it's really freaking cool, man. Like it's one of those things that like I kind of wish I had gotten a bit more of it into my body, like earlier on.
it's a cool thing because you can kind of reverse or implode, and like we have these things called like attenuverters, right? And attenuverters take something and like reverse it or take it and they kind of turn it inside out. And we have wave folders. So I can take something and it's not on, I can take something like a bell and turn it into a drone, turn it into a drum, turn it into I can totally invert that wave and change it so much it goes from being a triangle into a sine wave or a square wave, and then it has characteristics that if I know what those waves can do and what they end up sounding like as acoustic instruments, then you can start to restructure things and you come up with ideas. It's really interesting at the beginning of electronic music that none of the electronic instruments, the original modes, had keyboards at all. They had sequencers and they had alternative input. You have an LFO run it or the envelope run it or another oscillator trigger an oscillator. And that was the way you looked at it. And they said, once they brought the keyboards in, said, well, you're limiting the actual like advancement of the form by limited to the white and black keys. Because that's what you see today with these multiple grids and alternative input methods that have capabilities that keyboards don't have. So you can actually cross into zones that you could never do on the keyboard and cross into keys and patterns and areas that you would never musically ever hit typically. Yeah. And then it just allows you to expand the form.
100%. And it almost brings it back full circle in a way. Like when you're thinking about like instruments that like outside of like the European and like American like canon, string instruments in Asia, for example, Chinese, Japanese string instruments, and instruments in India, singing in a lot of the Southern Asian cultures. They do not adhere to like how we tune our instruments, right?
Tuning is totally different. The scales are different.
Right. So they're just like in between what we would consider a minor second or a half step. They're like in between those notes. Like, that's a whole other
other thing. There's a whole other idea of getting into like the discordance. Like a lot of times with synthesizers, what we do is we get the oscillators slightly out of tune. Like if I have a bunch of oscillators, I'll detune each one so they're slightly not on the key.
Right.
On purpose to get that sound that's not standard. Right. That to me is like where you get other people like, I want to get a Steinway or I want to get a Stradivarius. It's like, no, I'm actually looking for something that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
I'm trying to create something that's a little not expected.
I mean, it sounds like those notes would be like fat, the pH, like big, beefy.
They get fat. When you start layering, that's the thing about analog is like analog went away when FM synthesis came because it took up so much headroom. So if you go back and listen to the old 60s, 70s analog recordings, they took up so much headroom that a lot of recording engineers, producers, like, as soon as like the DX7 came along and FM synthesis and things like the D50 that were digital synths, they don't take up that headroom. They're more like pianos, they're more like bells, they have violins, polyphonic synths versus monophonics, and they don't take up the band. They're not as warm, but so people say, oh, I like these better because I can control it. But then they lost some of the magic that the mini modes and the RF2600s and stuff can do because it's not supposed to be real. It's supposed to be something different.
Right. When you can, they're putting themselves in a box again, right? Not able to like see how different perspectives could like advance the art. No, I hear you. I appreciate the history. I'm learning a lot right now.
Yeah, because I'm a big synth head. So I mean, I followed like the advancement of these things back in the 50s with Robert Moog, and then you had Buchla. So in the idea of electronic music, you have the East Coast and West Coast. So East Coast is Bob Moog, and then Buchla is West Coast. And the difference is like you have subtractive synthesis, which is what Bob Moog and all the Moogs do. And then what you have with what you had in the West Coast with those synths is you have additive synthesis, which is all based on like sine waves versus square waves, and it kind of can start at any point Where a subtractive synth is like very left to right. You go from one module to the next, from the filter bank to the
Right.
envelope generator to it has a very specific flow. But the bookless synths could start like anywhere.
Oh.
And the bookless synths didn't use keyboards. They had these weird press controls that were not equated to a keyboard at all. They were like touch capacitors that were not specifically set. One of them looked like an eagle. It was formed like an eagle.
That's crazy.
And it was very kind of psychedelic. It's like, well, we just do what we want. And I'm not going to follow a keyboard. I'm going to make this thing. It looks like an eagle, and it looks like the eagle's wings. And you go and you hit the capacitors on, and it's like, okay, well, it is what it is.
That's out, man. That's crazy.
Yeah. And so the West Coast stuff is very cinematic. It's very ethereal. It's not something like, Moogs is like a funkadelic. It's a bass line. Like, I can hear that. It follows like pentatonic scale. It follows like traditional stuff.
Right.
Where the stuff from the West Coast is all kind of out there. It's like sound effects, weird, strange things, like this bubbling weird envelopes that just continue, and weird things come out of here and there, come out of left and right. It's all over the place. And you're like, wow, what's that? And the thing is, like, if you take each one, you could use a subtractive synth or an additive synth in the same song. They have different colors. It's like a different instrument. Right. You use it for different reasons to color the structure. But a lot of people say it's all got to be additive, or it's all got to be subtractive, or it's all got to be, sample based. It's like, why don't you take the right tool for the right song?
Right. Yeah. And like kind of going back to what I'm blanking on who you quoted, Frank Zappa, right?
Yeah.
Like
Zappa.
Make sure you're expressing what you need to express in that moment. So, and using the right tool is part of that, right? Making sure, and again, I'm not huge into synths, but like I have to have the right patch on to get the colors I want. Like I have a Korg SV1 here that has really great EP sounds, just great electric piano sounds.
Like pianos, yeah.
Has a great whirly, a pretty good Rhodes, a pretty decent organ. Doesn't have as many like cool things as the Nord pianos.
Yeah, those are cool. Those are like the stage gear. Like you get a Phantom or a Kronos. And it's got all the presets, and it's got everything that a working musician needs. And then you get like the crazy synths, like the Moog, the ARP 2500s and the Prophet 5s, the Prophet 10s. Those are kind of very specific machines,
right?
Because for what your tones and colors the Rick Wakemans and the guys from like ELO and Emerson, Lake and Palmer and Genesis, that's the stuff they play with. They kind of get into that progressive rock, even new wave stuff. But like where you start to really focus in on what can these synths do? What kind of worlds can they bring you to? That's not the preset. They actually took time to actually create and color.
Yeah, for sure. Well, one time when I was in school and undergrad, one of my professors brought Jordan Rudess from Dream Theater.
Okay.
To kind of show us around the Kronos, because he like helped develop the Korg Kronos, is my understanding, right? And he was just like giving us very basic exercise, because he's a classically trained cat. He can like shred like no one's business. But he was like walking us through just like very basic exercises on how to like play the things that we would want to play in a traditional instrument, but like synthesize it, for a lack of a better term. And it blew my mind, man. It was really interesting. And he did a couple of playing like kind of exhibitions or examples, like here's how I do this, and here's how I use the sequencer to figure out all my background stuff. Like he was insane.
What's cool about that, like those type of synths, like the Kronos, is like, if you get to a Kronos or a Phantom, they're workstation synths, right? And they kind of can do like everything. But the whole point, a lot of these synths is like, if there are strings on a synth and you're a keyboard player, you should try to play those strings like a string player would play it rather than like a keyboard player.
Right.
If you play a horn line, you should try to play it like the way an alto sax or a baritone would play it.
Right.
And the cool thing is like there are like Roland actually built some capabilities into their synths that allow you with pedals and different things to actually take behavior from that instrument and use it on the keyboard, right? To be able to actually get a guitar to do feedback, right? So if you're playing a guitar in a Roland synth that has supernatural capability, if you use like the I don't know, the whammy bar or the pitch bender,
right.
If you modulate it, it can do feedback. If you do certain settings, it will do like it will do certain behaviors like harmonics. And so you can so when you start to play it, you don't actually try to play that when it's in guitar mode like a keyboard. You start to think like a guitar player. You do the slides, you do the harmonics, you do the pitch bends, you do the feedback. You start to like, oh, this is how I should approach this instrument because it's not a piano, it's a guitar. So when I do power chords or octaves, I'm going to do it in such a way to actually replicate what a guitar player would actually be doing.
100%. And you got to be that versatile. You can't just sit in your ways. Yeah, you can't sit in bebop is what jazz is today.
yeah. Bebop is like because I remember it was funny. I saw some kid when I had this video where these people were talking about Sun Ra. And there were people like, well, why does he dress that way? It was a bunch of jazz students. It's like, well, he's denigrating the form of jazz because he's dressing like a space outfit. I was like, you don't get it. Like that has nothing to do with denigrating jazz.
No,
that's just who he is, right? That's the thing. Is like Parliament Funkadelic. They dress like space aliens. Well, because they were they're copying Sun Ra.
Right. That's always bothered me about like just music and academics, like overall, like the idea that because I'm studying this, it is sacred to me and it can't change because this is how I was taught it, right? And the people that pop out in history, if we're talking about jazz, like people that pop out in history are the people that go up against the grain, right?
Yeah. Push it.
Thelonious Monk was Monk because he wasn't doing what everyone else was doing. Hancock is Hancock because he wasn't doing.
Break the rules. I mean, you know the rules so you can break them.
Exactly.
But like everybody's on the bleeding edge. Everybody's a hater. I mean, when Hendrix walked in the room and he did the feedback, the engineers wanted to edit it out, and he sat there and said no, and he started to learn the board and said no, you're not taking it out. And he got really involved with the engineers, which was like unheard of.
Right.
Because he was doing so many sounds that they said, well, that's not right. You can't do that. And he said, that's what it is. And so, he fought to keep that sound there. And sometimes when you're on that bleeding edge, people look at him and say, what's this guitar player messed around with the engineers for? They're supposed to do that. He shouldn't touch that.
Right.
And he started going into that zone because if you know what you want and everybody else thinks it's wrong, then you're probably onto something.
That's right. And I feel like that's like how like half of people, they're like they don't know they're using that as an excuse to sound bad, and then the other half of the people are actually on the bleeding edge. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, there's some people that Lou Reed would sometimes walk in with an out-of-tune guitar because he didn't feel like doing it, not that he was trying to do it, right? Versus like Hendrix coming in and saying, "Yeah, I'm doing these weird space sounds and bird sounds, and I'm going to do that, right? Because that's actually the song. That's
intention
what I'm trying." Yeah. So I mean, I had the intention of doing that. And it's not standard, and it's like it's overloading what you're expecting. It's like, but that's what we have to build for, because this is where we're gonna go. Like like Prince used to get in trouble with Warner's because they come in and say Dove's Cry doesn't have a bass line, that can't go out, and like it's going out without the bass line. Or Kiss sounds like a demo. It's like they came in and heard it and said, "Well, is that finished?" It's like that's the way it's going out. And they're like,
Yeah.
How could that be? I said, well, that's the way it's going out. It's like, get out of my house. You know, the Warner Brothers guy goes this. Like, that's all done. It's like, who are you? You're a suit. Get out of here.
Yeah, I mean, and it's always like, you know, the stranglehold that like money just has on the creation of art is really unfortunate, and it's not just music, but like authors who can't get their stuff published because it's not gonna sell.
Resonate,
Yeah, right, or filmmakers who have studios come in and cut up their movie because it needs to have, you know, whatever, like a big third act action sequence, or you know,
it's got to fit the profile. It's got to fit the algorithm.
exactly.
Like, it's got to fit the formula. You
Yeah,
know?
and what they don't realize, like, or what they should realize, because like history just does it over and over and over again, is like these things that pop out that are unique, like are the things that are going to they're going to sell. They're going to give you more prestige. They're going to get you there. So it's better. The art is in better hands, in the artist's hands, than the whoever is holding the money. Yeah,
there's an interesting story about comic books. Like the king of comic books, I don't know if you know, but like Jack Kirby, right? Jack Kirby created like the Marvel universe, right? So he left and went to DC, and he got involved in Superman. He kind of reimagined Superman, and created like Darkseid and all these all these ideas he had at Marvel. He kind of recreated in this thing called the Fourth World at DC, and DC brought him over there to do that, because he had created all the Marvel stuff. He created like Avengers and Fantastic Four, all that stuff. And then they weren't paying him, so he left in 1970. So he went over to DC. They give him the free reign to do all these books. And then he starts to do Superman and draw Lois Lane and Clark Kent and Superman. And the corporate guys look, it's like, we don't like the way you're doing Superman's face. It's like, well, this is my vision of Superman.
Right.
And they went and had guys from the 50s do the corporate version of Superman's face over the Kirby body. And fans were like, what's up with this? It don't look right. Well, it don't look right because it's not the full thing, because they had the corporate guys create a corporate look for Superman when they brought the guy there to reinvent Superman, and then they didn't want it to happen. I was like, what are you doing?
No, it's a great example, right? Because like they say they won't change. They say they want someone to mix it up. But as long as it doesn't perceivably
change the formula
and threaten their bottom line, right? Because again, people, like we talked about earlier, people don't like change, right? No, I mean, that comic book example is great. I mean, and you're kind of seeing it with the modern MCU right now.
Yeah,
right? Like the Marvel Cinematic Universe overall. Like the last 3 or 4 years haven't been that great, and it's because
innovative. They lost the innovation.
Right.
And they lost a lot of their core actors, and then they tried to reinvent it. Saying, well, I don't need the guys who actually set it up. But now they're like, well, maybe I do.
You really do, actually.
Maybe I need writers who actually follow closer to what Kirby and Lee wrote, or what Claremont and them wrote, instead of like thinking you could change it, right? Like you know, a lot of, you know, we got guys like Frank Miller. Like he reinvented Batman, and the Dark Knight we got was because of Frank Miller. More than Bob Kane. Totally. And because they followed that idea, it worked. But when they don't follow it, it kind of falls off. If they have some guy comes in, well, I can just do it this other way. But if it doesn't resonate with the fans, you know, it's like there's a certain structure to some of these characters, right? And then if you aren't true to it, and you think you can just have anybody just write it, or AI write it. And then you're like, the fans like, that don't feel right. That doesn't sound right. That doesn't look right. It's like, what's going on?
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, like, if we were to give the corporations full reign on this stuff, they would have AI write the first draft of everything, and then just have a couple of writers just like kind of touch it up a little bit and then send it out. And with the crappy part is that it would sell something, right? It would still make them some money, but the whole artistic process would be completely scrapped.
Totally wrecked. I mean, if you let AI write your baseline, you might get a decent baseline, but it's not your baseline.
No.
And this is where the mistake is. Like AI just takes everything that already exists and it will sound good. It might
Yeah.
look good,
Mhm.
but what it's missing is the spark, right?
Right.
That spark of human, and sometimes it's like it's missing that imperfection or what I call the
Mhm.
happy accident. Because a lot of what the good music is, it's not always totally in time. It's not always totally
No.
synced up. And
Yeah.
so if you listen to something like a guy like Neil Young, right?
Sure.
Neil Young can do perfect pitch when he wants to. When he's with Crosby, Stills, and Nash, he can do it. But when he's with Crazy Horse, he goes off pitch. He does kind of sloppy work, but it's very personal. And it kind of he's like the
Yeah.
grandfather of punk because
Hmm.
he had that punk aesthetic and he put it into the music where there's a lot of feeling and there's less perfection, but a lot of feeling. And I mean, guys like Kurt Cobain, they idolized it and they brought it into that grunge because of what he did. That you don't have to be perfect. That you can have a lot of heart and a lot of passion, and that can actually carry through a lot harder than even trying to hit the note perfectly. Like if you have a little scratchy, vulnerability in your voice, that actually can key into people a little bit more.
There is 100% beauty in imperfection. Whenever I get to do something in a studio, and like it's one of my tunes or whatever, like, all right, I always make sure we have like a safe take so that everyone feels comfortable. Not because I'm ever going to actually put out the safe take, um, but when everyone knows that there's a take that will work, they tend to
Let you
they
let you
get more
go.
creative. Like they feel like they can go a little bit. All right, we got a safe take. All right, this next take, I want everyone to just take like 3 or 4 more risks than they did on this last one.
Last time, yeah,
Cool. And then if we still have time, then everyone go balls to the wall. Let's just see where we go.
we
And
see where it hits.
and that's almost always
The
the
best
best
thing.
take.
Usually, like if you talk to guys in the '70s, like a lot of times out in John Yellow Brick Road, he said, "Recorded in a mansion, everything's third, fourth take."
Mm-hmm.
When you watch it like a documentary on it, and he said he kind of laments like not being able to do it that way because like they just rented the mansion. It's kind of like Exile on Main Street with the Stones. They were in a mansion, they were sitting in the basement, and they were just recording kind of whatever they felt. Right, and they write the songs, but then they let it feel. They let the feel like just run through it and see what happens, and it would change. And it wasn't always what the original demo idea was.
Yeah.
And it's like the looseness, like Keith Richards kind of defines looseness. Like the fact that he can do this kind of very loose guitar playing, but it works. It's ramshackle, but it's like there's nothing else that would work. It's like you're trying to be too perfect, you kind of screw it up.
Well, yeah. And there's a certain like looseness that you need. Like I like that word loose. Sometimes when I'm talking to my students and I see that they're too stiff, I'm like, I show them a video of like any big professional piano player, and when they're really going at it like shredding. Or there's a
Yeah.
video of Prince that I show them. I think it's the video where he's playing a solo on My Guitar Gently Weeps.
Oh, that one, that's unbelievable. That's
Uh,
like that's considered one of the best guitar playing like ever.
yeah, I mean it's insane. He's so loose, but he's also doing all this crazy movement,
Yeah.
and it's all like working.
Passion.
And
It's
it's
kind
like,
of like passion, like his
yeah,
passion for
right.
playing.
And it's like, yeah, he's gotten to a point where he can do all the technical stuff while still being all that loose. That's what we should all like strive to be doing, because that's
Mhm.
when you're going to be able to actually express yourself and say what you want to say versus say what you think you should be saying. You know what I mean?
It's kind of like Hendrixian. Like if you look at Hendrix when he really got into it, like a Monterey
Mm-hmm.
Pop, Woodstock, like he would just, and there are things like when he was in San Francisco doing stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like he just would just feel it. It's like all feel. And there's one time Bill Graham told him, was like, "You're moving around too much.
Mm-hmm.
You're in a band of gypsies like concert." And he's like, and he said, "I need you because we're recording this to not do all the acrobatics, just sit straight and just do it straight." So he did one show where he didn't move around like he normally did. And then he said, "Was that good, Bill?" And the guy said, "Yeah." I was like, "Now I'm going to do it my way." And then and the next one, he was doing all the acrobatics and doing it with his teeth but that one, when you hear it, like it feels like
Stiff,
that
like,
Hendrix passion. It's still good. It's not. It wasn't any better. It's just different.
Mm-hmm.
The other one, one was more like Stevie Ray Vaughan tight. The other one's more Hendrixian loose.
Yeah.
No, it's like, well, I kind of like the loose one.
No, and I think that's I think watching people have fun is fun. Like no one wants to, see someone just sit there and be like depressed. I don't know. Like I think that the showman piece of being a musician is it's part of the whole thing. There's a presentation to it. Like, do you think like classical pianists like lift their arms like this because like it's good technique?
Need to do that to get the song done.
No, they don't. There's a flow to it. There's a thing that they're doing for effect, and that's cool. Is it cheesy? Sure, but does it convey something to the audience that they might have needed visually? Like, hell yeah,
you need the visuals. Sometimes you got to have that visual. It's part of the show, and it's also kind of the intent in the passion. The kind of you get to a band like the Clash, and the way they attack in that punk aesthetic, or you get like the Talking Heads. It's like to be in that kind of zone or that kind of indie aesthetic, that punk aesthetic.
Right.
It's like you're taking risks and you're doing things in a kind of not exactly traditional way, and so some of that is part of the whole gig. To kind of feel it. You got to feel it to actually present it,
Oh, yeah, 100%. Yeah. Venom, are you talked about some Marvel stuff. Are you watching this new the kind of nostalgic X-Men animated show? X-Men.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of fanboys not like it, but the fanboys tend to be like that. But
yeah,
I kind of dig it. Like I remember, I watched it when they came out. The originals.
Yeah.
And I appreciate the aesthetic of what they were trying to do to kind of capture that 97. And I'm a comic book freak. I'm a Kirby freak. I got like all the 100 Fantastic Four.
Oh, very cool.
Like the first 100, I got all those. I got all the Spider-Man dick codes, Wally Wood, EC Comics. I'm a comic crazy. Right. I know about all the key stuff, even like the black and whites, the Cerebus, the stray bullets, all that stuff.
Very cool.
And it's to me, it's just another side of art because I grew up, liking music, and then I like comic books. And I used to go to the comic shops looking for the Fantastic Fours, looking for the Kirby Fantastic Fours. Not what was going on in the 70s. I was looking like what happened in 64 and 65 and 66. I kind of wanted that history, so I would tracking the stuff down. And I just like I'm a big Kirby Ditko guy, and I'm like the whole Marvel universe is like it's really them that kind of designed it, even more than Lee. I mean, Lee kind of did the dialogue, but Ditko and Kirby were the visionaries of what it looks like.
Yeah, which is like it's a comic book. Like that's like 60% of the game, honestly. Like.
The storytelling's coming from the artist.
and that's a good like segue because this X-Men 97 cartoon feels like to me like one of the best representations of the X-Men on screen.
Closer to the truth because with a cartoon you can get closer to what you really want to do than physical acting. And comic books the animation could always get closer to the actual comic book. Because it's actually possible to actually do everything the writers and artists imagined without doing the stuff you have to do in real life.
Yeah, and that plus like I think the writing that the showrunner, I think his name's Bo DeMeo, like put into this season, just it felt so much more like the package that we kind of all didn't know that we wanted. I like the X-Men movies from like the 2000s.
The originals, yeah.
And I think for what at the time and what they were, I think they were really important.
They're pretty good. I mean, they got a good feel for those Claremont Byrne characters. The kind of new X-Men versus like the original Kirby X-Men, which actually failed. Like the original Kirby, that's one of his ideas that didn't work.
Right, exactly.
It was actually, Byrne and Claremont and Cockrum that actually created the X-Men that we all love today. It was created by Stan Lee and Kirby, but their version didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
The Fantastic Four and Avengers, they worked. But the original X-Men didn't work.
Yeah. I just think it's a great example of like, let someone have control. They I think they gave the Disney probably gave them some like strict stipulations, like you can't touch this character, you can't do that. But for the most part, it has like this really like clear overarching arc. And
this feels right. It feels closer to what you expect the X-Men to be if you're a fan of the X-Men. If you're a fan at least of that style, and that's that kind of version of the X-Men. Like, wow, that feels true. Versus when somebody takes something and they like, oh, did they really get that? Did they really do the Teen Titans the way I read it? No, maybe not.
No, they didn't. No, I mean, I think this is the best. It's like Cyclops I've ever seen. I mean, like, I think they kind of did him dirty in the movie. So
he was never really given that much depth. Wolverine always gets more depth. Because he's like, he's the bad boy. He's going to get more depth. But
but they sidelined him basically the entire spoiler alert. He doesn't really have all that much to do, which is kind of refreshing because that's kind of what Wolverine is in the comics. He isn't always
he isn't really always there. I mean, other people like Miller might have gone and given him his own thing.
Totally.
And he gets these little side things where they pay more attention to him. But, he wasn't the main deal. That's not the way it was written, but because he said, the actor, he's such a good actor. When you see him on screen, he gets more.
Oh yeah, I mean, Hugh Jackman's amazing, and
because you got him, and he's actually doing Wolverine. Like, oh, okay, that's what I would think Wolverine would be.
True.
Hugh Jackman.
Absolutely, man.
Closer than the Cyclops guy. I'm like, is that really Cyclops? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it was almost more like the writing though. I think that actor's a great actor. I think.
Maybe he just didn't give him enough good lines. He just didn't get the lines.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like, how they took him out in X3 was they kind of did him dirty. I've been thinking a lot about the X-Men lately because of the show, and just thinking about the comparisons. It's an exciting time to be an X-Men fan.
Yeah, it's cool. I like to see what they do when Marvel kind of fully brings them in.
Mm-hmm.
I just hope they don't wreck it because lately they've been not doing stuff at the level of the original Marvel movies.
Agreed.
Though I heard Deadpool's going to be but Deadpool's its own thing. So everybody's saying Deadpool 3 is actually going to be a reinvigoration of at least the sales. And then people who are going to like it, from what I've heard. But it's like a lot of the movies and the arcs that they're trying to do have not been like Endgame level. They're like, that's not where.
No, I think like Guardians 3 was pretty cool, but like there was a continuation of something they were doing before. I hope that they take a second, stop putting out so much, and focus on quality versus quantity.
I hope when they bring the FF, when they bring Galactus and they bring a Doctor Doom. And they actually, if you actually follow what Kirby and Lee did with the first 100 issues of Fantastic Four, and you make people believe the world's going to come to an end because Galactus is going to destroy everything, and the Surfer comes and it's like majestic, and you make it feel real, and you don't make it feel forced.
Right.
That's like the whole Marvel age came about because of what Kirby did in those first 100 issues with Lee, and they've never captured it right, and so if they actually start with the FF and they do the FF right, they do Doctor Doom right, they do Galactus right, and they do the Mole Man right, they do all that stuff right, Negative Zone, and then the Great Black Panther. It's like you could do something really big, and it could be really connected, but like you have to really respect the original work and respect people's view of that work and do it right.
100%. Yeah, absolutely, man.
That's interesting. But we kind of got into comics because we're the nerdy things. But yeah, that's the ultimate nerdy thing. But it's like I would just hope the fanboys get a little less sexist every time they see the female characters and come down on them all the time. It's like, why do you got to do that?
Yeah. You put like a black woman on screen and it's like, it's woke. And it's like, come on, guys. Like, what are we doing here?
Come on. Why you got to be like that? It's like, come on. It's like, they're female characters in the Marvel universe and they're powerful.
Right.
So why your problem. They're not all going to be like 1963 Sue Storm.
No,
1963 Sue Storm is like the way it was written.
Right,
Mr. Fantastic, like kind of denigrating her and telling her, acting like she's a little kid. That's not Jean Grey.
No.
That's not Elektra.
That's not Storm.
Marvel.
That's not
like any of that. Like I don't know what you read, but that's not what they are.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
That's cool.
Yeah,
we have an interesting time here talking, and like if people get to your link tree, because we're near the end, what do they find at that playback?
So I'm a podcaster myself. I run 2 shows. Currently in season 3 or 4, I forget, of Play Black. It's arts and culture from the perspective of 2 artists of color. Myself, and my good friend Jay. And Jay's an author. He writes cool fantasy books, and we're both just huge nerds. So we take it down from that
everything,
from that perspective. And then the other show that I run that I hope is going to be running another season in September is the BIPOC Artist Hour, where I talk to artists of color about their unique journeys through the arts, but especially what brings them joy. So if they want to check that out, go ahead and hit the link tree. I think there'll be a link to our new YouTube channel, which it's brand new. We haven't been doing video up until about 3 or 4 months ago. We're actually breaking down the first 5 or 6 episodes of X-Men 97. So if you want to listen, if you want to listen and watch along, go for it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Because I've been following a lot of comic YouTubes, lately, just checking them out, and it's always cool to see somebody getting into that. And also from an African American perspective, it's getting to see Black folks talk about stuff they love like that. Where a lot of times we don't get to see that. We only see another point of view. That's really cool. So I do encourage everybody to click the link tree here, Play Black, and that will be fully clickable when we're published. And we were just on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. And that will be clickable on those channels. And by tomorrow, we'll be on all the major podcast platforms that you can watch or listen to a podcast, Apple, Spotify, video podcast. So you'll be able to see this on video on Spotify. So, thank you for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Phantom. This is a great combo. Appreciate it.
Well, have a good night.